Hello, everyone.
Hello, Matt.
Hey, Karsten, Bruce, Brian, Jeff, James, Elsa, Stuart, Rosemary, the other Jeff. So, if I'm not mistaken, the last couple of leading thoughts up to 149, so 147 to 149 were written by Steiner on January 18th, 1925. So we're almost caught up um, to where Steiner was at exactly a century ago, delivering these, publishing these leading thoughts. Um, and in the sections that we read for this week, Steiner's discussing the three different phases of evolutionary history, right? The heavenly, the mythic, and the earthly, and trying to describe the gradual differentiation of the human being out of the spiritual hierarchies, and all of the hierarchies are involved in the creation of the human. But he's dwelling in particular on the archai and the role that they play in shaping the human form in these sections. And he discusses the way in which the human in the heavenly phase of evolutionary history was just a germ, not even barely differentiated from the working of the archai. Um, and the intermediate phase where there's a differentiation which begins to occur between what he calls the world spirit and the world body, and there's a sense in which, as we move through these phases, the cosmos becomes um, less and less a direct revelation of spirit and more like um, the accomplished work of the divine, and becomes more and more calculable by a more and more inwardized human being whose freedom of will and whose thinking capacity becomes less and less calculable. So um, there's an inwardization of the incalculable, and what is external as the human being differentiates from the cosmos becomes more and more calculable, more and more hardened. Steiner briefly discusses old Saturn and old Sun, these earlier phases of cosmic evolution, um, when cosmic intelligence and will were not yet uh, separated from what we today call the physical universe. He talks about the uh, effort that Copernicus and Kepler went through at the beginning of the consciousness soul age, the beginning of the scientific revolution, um, to, in a way, win this interior freedom for human beings by describing and calculating the movements of the heavenly bodies. And as we've continued to reiterate as we've gone through here, the birth of this modern scientific perspective of an apparently mechanistic cosmos is just as important um, for our understanding of the natural world. Actually, it's less important for our understanding of the natural world than it is for our understanding of the human being and the changes that we're going through inwardly. And it's as though we needed the external cosmos to become hardened and calculable such that um, what was spiritual in that external cosmos and the macrocosm could be internalized by us such that the microcosm, we ourselves, could realize our own freedom, right? And so this growing self-consciousness illustrated in what the scientific revolution was up to, again, focusing less on the knowledge of a mechanistic cosmos and more on the internal transformation this allowed the human being to go through. Um, as we learn to calculate the heavens, we also gained a deeper sense of our own freedom. Um, Steiner also just discusses our understanding of history. If you go back to, in a sense of earthly history, right? If you go back to the intellectual soul period, say in ancient Greece, you've got Herodotus, you've got the beginnings of a sense that, oh, there's a history to be told here, which would be a series of sort of factual occurrences, very new idea. And it really doesn't come into its own until the age of the consciousness soul. And I think in particular, among the German idealists, um, Herder and certainly in Hegel, you get this real rich sense of the importance of history, and that kind of earthly history seems very much to be um, deeply important to the consciousness soul. And it's part of what makes us feel so isolated from the spiritual world is that we think of all of evolutionary history as a series of facts, um, and lose our capacity to even imagine what mythological or heavenly history would be like. And Steiner's trying to welcome us back into this richer sense of history that would be kind of history beyond clock time, as it were. He discusses Lucifer and Ahriman again, and the roles that the adversaries play, both as um, hindrances but also helpers in human evolution. Um, Lucifer wants to tempt us to um, assert our freedom in a way that would overthrow the lawfulness of the physical world. Um, Lucifer wants to break free of any bounds upon intelligence and will, and this influence can become too extreme um, if it tries to recover what has been lost. Right, we move into a Lucifer would want to hold us back to hold on to these earlier forms of mythological and heavenly history when we really need to move forward. Armon alternatively would want to rush us into the future. Um, Armon is trying to reduce everything, including the human being, to number, weight, and measure, Steiner says. And between these two adversaries is Christ, who Steiner describes as having achieved this free cosmic deed of love within earthly history. Um, and Steiner echoes something Paul says in Romans, I think, about how this Christ event, this mystery of Golgotha, the Son, he says, the soul of the Son descending and entering into the earth is of great importance, not only for human beings, but for the whole of the cosmos. This is a cosmic transformation. It's not just a transformation in the nature of the human being. Steiner discusses the importance of repeated earthly lives and gives us one perspective of um, cosmic evolution through these different phases of history that would be the perspective from our earthly lives between birth and death. But then he also gives us an alternative perspective of cosmic history uh, as we are between death and a new birth. So, and how we usually think of it in the afterlife state. In that afterlife state between death and a new birth, we are in a sense communing with the hierarchies, with the spiritual beings, and it is because of our earthly lives and our relationship to these earth forces that we become self-conscious and gain a sense of individuated egohood, right? We have a sense of I, and when we cross over that, the gate of death, what we're working on through these repeated earthly lives is being able to maintain that sense of individuation of our I in the afterlife, in the time between death and a new birth, so that we can meet these spiritual beings not in such a way that we just dissolve into them, but in a way that allows us to maintain our individuality, so that we can encounter them sort of face to face, rather than just regressing, as it were, to that earlier state of undifferentiated uh, womb-like coexistence with them. Um, Steiner talks about how in earlier phases of cosmic evolution, the human being was being developed in a piecemeal kind of way, that there were um, um, lung beings and limb beings and head beings, and that the archai needed to bring these fragments together into the tripartite human being and the form that we know today, bringing together the nerves and the senses, the rhythmic system and the metabolism and limbs. Um, but that each of these aspects of our human being was developed, at different phases of cosmic evolution. Um, let's see if there's anything else I'd like to share here. I think I think that's probably enough for me. So I'll pause there and invite further reflection. Bruce, please.
Thanks, Matt. Really great summary as always. This these sections really raised a lot of questions for me about freedom and love, and his statements about the hierarchies working out of perfect love and freedom seemed to me to contradict things I learned way back when I was 19 and 20 from the people who were first introducing me to anthroposophy back in Ann Arbor, which is where I met in Michigan. So I got interested, and just before this started, I did some research about what Steiner says about love and freedom with the hierarchies and with human beings. And I used an AI to do this, and I'll tell you about that in a second. But so I'll paste in the chat for something that you can look at later. The summary, it's a 4-page summary. Please don't read it while we're doing this, but you can look at it later. And I don't know, Matt, if you want to, I can post it maybe in the response to this on YouTube or someplace later.
Sure. Or a comment on Substack. Yeah.
Yep, on
I can
Substack
share
would
it there
probably be
too.
better. So it's a Google Doc is where I put it.
Mhm.
And it's not sending it. There it goes. Okay. So that's the link to the document. And it's just a direct copy of the stuff that's out of the AI. I didn't edit it or anything. And there are references in it. So I just asked about I started out by asking, what does he say about the cosmos of love? So I found it actually interesting, and it clarified some ideas for me. So now a second about how I did this. So there is a website called you.com that aggregates all of the different AI models. And so with one subscription, you can get access to all of the different models. Now, if you look at the individual models, if you had an account with every one of them, you would get some extra bells and whistles that they give there. U.com doesn't give you that. It gives you basic access to all the models. It also lets you create what's called an agent. And an agent, you can choose one of the models, and I've chosen a model that's called Claude, one of the Claude models that does very good at the kind of thing I want it to do, and restricted it to using only lectures by Steiner at the Rudolf Steiner, at the RS archive, Rudolf Steiner archive. So it's not going to look on the web. It's not going to use anything else. It's only going to look at those lectures. And so you can ask it to summarize points that are available in English on those lectures. So this model, this agent is available to anyone. I've made it public, and I'll post the link to it here if you want to use it. I hope that's the right link. If it isn't, let me follow that and make sure. So you will need that's it. The model is called Steiner. You probably have to have a u.com account, but there are free options. If you have an association with a university, there's pretty reasonable pricing for if you have a university, $80 a year or something like that for access to all these models. Okay, so that's what I did. I just wanted to share that with you without going into the detail. They may be only questions that I really had from this. So if you want to look at the Google Doc afterwards, you can see get an idea of what my concerns were and how Steiner talked about them over the period of time of his lectures.
Thanks, Bruce. I mean, this raises a more general question for me about how we are to engage with these tools. I mean, with however many 300 volumes of transcribed lectures that Steiner has left behind, it can be quite difficult to sort through all of that. And RS Archive has a search function, but there's only so much time in the day. And I think I have found it tremendous. I haven't used u.com, but other tools to search that archive and to try to get a sense for what Steiner has said about a particular issue over the course of decades, right? And I find it tremendously helpful. Um, and there are so many different ways we might use these tools. I mean, we could have the AI work with the original German and then tell us how it's translating that into English instead of relying on a human translator. However, human translators have perhaps a deeper sensitivity for the nuance of that effort to translate, but then you're getting the bias of that human translator. Of course, the AI is going to have its own biases when it does those translations, but it can at least clue us into what's going into the decisions it's making. If we ask, why translate it this way instead of that way, um, and for my uh, own study, I have found engaging with these tools to be helpful, but I think obviously we need to be careful here. Um, Ahriman is the operative being to um, be in relationship with here, and I think Steiner seems to say we can't avoid that relationship, even if Ahriman is an adversary. There's something about these new technologies that I think we are called to participate in while also resisting at a certain level, perhaps the ways in which we're being encouraged culturally and psychologically to um, identify our own thinking activity with the algorithmic machine learning processes that are being used by these large language models. And I think as long as we resist that equivalence, then we can work with these technologies in a way that is an aid to our study. But I have found it necessary to do so while also being clear um, about the difference between human intelligence and algorithmic intelligence, machine learning intelligence, if we can even call it intelligence. But on some level, it is um, what these machine learning algorithms are doing is in a sense it's cosmic intelligence brought to Earth, trapped in these minerals, rare earth minerals, right? And being um, it's deadened. It doesn't have the warmth of human thinking or the moral vector of that comes from the way our will imbues our thinking, and yet there's still intelligence in it, right? And so I think as long as we're clear on what these technologies represent and can speak um, to the ways in which human intelligence is different, and that we can't just replace our own intelligence with these tools, then I think we're okay. But curious how others think about this. Do you want to chime in on that, Bruce?
Yeah, I almost said more, but I didn't. But now you've provided the opening to say more. So, um, I have two things to say. I'll probably maybe more than two. So this is really useful for me because I have 50 years of experience of reading Steiner and thinking about things, and so it really helps me summarize. The AI helps me summarize ideas that I've kind of encountered but never fully integrated and can't put together across all of Steiner's things. And I really found contradictions in the section that we're reading today with things that I thought I understood, which I look back on and I see those things mostly came from people explaining things to me. And I have known, I mean, I could give very specific examples of how those people who had, at the time they were teaching me, had more than 50 years of experience and from reading the original German and were very knowledgeable, were lecturers around, around the country on these things, and they were still wrong about stuff, which I know years later, and I say I could give very specific examples of that and how that came about. Very important things they were wrong about. So this really helped me in those respects. It clarified a lot of things. Now, would I ever get to a stage of having my own spiritual experiences by using something like an AI, by approaching these things of questions intellectually? And I'm absolutely certain that I would not, because I tried real hard to do that. So what I found is what worked for me and what I believe can work for other people is, if you want to read Rudolf Steiner's lectures, to treat them in a very artistic way. And what I mean by that is that you can take a lecture. I mean, some of the very beautiful lectures, like Love and Its Meaning in the World, which are very pictorial and extremely beautifully put. You can form a picture in your mind of the lecture. So you read the lecture backwards, and then you try to form a pictorial conception of the lecture, which I used to be able to do. I used to do in drawings, and I can't draw, but I do something. And so then I would work with those pictures, and that lecture then became a part of me in a different way. After some time of working like that, I was able to read the lecture and read it imaginatively, and to follow Steiner as he spoke, so that he was carrying me in his experiences. So I would co-experience with him things in the lecture, but he was definitely there in a certain way, carrying my experience. And then after that, you can begin, or I could begin to have my own experiences where I am not as carried by Steiner. None of that could be achieved by understanding them intellectually and just using the AI to do that. So I'm agreeing with Matt in these essence things, and I wanted to add those things about how it's worked for me. I do want to say also, I mean, I don't really want to get into this, but I do want to correct one thing. AIs aren't algorithmic. They're fundamentally different than that, and we should talk about that sometime. The whole concept of artificial intelligence being algorithmically was the impossibility of that is why people used to say AI is impossible. So it's a completely different way that they work. So, but I don't think we should be talking about that here. I just wanted.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's a difference between good old-fashioned AI, which is not learning in the way that, we might think of nominalist theories of human cognition, where we learn a general idea from many examples of particulars that we generalize from. I think machine learning, there are different kinds of algorithms. Machine learning, I think, is still a kind of algorithm. It's just not pre-programmed by the engineer, but it learns itself from all the data that's fed into it. But anyways, we don't need to get into that. Rosemary, I want to hear what you're thinking and feeling.
I just wanted to clarify and go back to leading thought 143, which is maybe where we're going, where we came into this subject. The event of Golgotha is a cosmic deed and free, springing from the universal love. It is intelligible only by the love in man. So we have universal love. However, everybody can start to wrap themselves around what universal love is. Then the manifestation of it in the mystery of Golgotha, however you understand that. And only intelligible only by the love in the human being. So all of us know something about love. We know it has many, many, many manifestations, and we can understand it through our experience. What about our love of the mystery of Golgotha? What about our love of spiritual science, or our love of learning, philosophia, our love of learning? Those are all different kinds of love. And I'm really delighted that this topic came up right away, because I think that we're on the launch pad of carrying love forward right now, here and now. So, however, all those things are churning in you that you're adding to us. I just wanted to add as a footnote that during the Holy Nights between Christmas Eve and Epiphany, we read these same materials were being read by a group of anthroposophists. And so I was able to ask people after we read this to start the conversation. I asked the question, how is your spiritual love these days? You know, and then we had a very warm sharing, but it can only be talked about in terms of your human experience in a developmental way. So that was, I don't know if anybody here is ready for that, but I just wanted to lay out all of the levels that we're talking about.
Yeah, thanks, Rosemary. There's a lot of talk about we've spoken about it here in prior sessions, but more broadly, all of these conversions to Christianity that are happening, and I've been noticing, and other people are noticing too, how especially among the intellectuals who used to be, say, really intense atheists who are now converting to Christianity, they're offering kind of utilitarian arguments for why it's important to adopt a Christian worldview. And it seems to be there's very little about Christ and the Christ impulse, and it's more about cultural Christianity or what's being called mimetic Christianity, because it seems like this is very much being mediated by the internet. And these utilitarian arguments for Christianity, it's like it's all about the intellect and like thinking about why this might be helpful for the meaning crisis for this reason or that reason. I haven't seen many people talk about love, and very few of these converts really want to get into, okay, well, the resurrection, can you explain that? And like, well, I don't want to talk about that. I don't, that's not what's important. What's important are the cultural norms that we can impose to combat relativism or whatever. Um, but there is this stumbling block. And, Paul writes about this, that, the difference between um, wisdom and folly, and how the wise won't understand what's going on with Christ, um, because we have to open our hearts. It's a form of heart understanding. We can only understand it through love, not through our intellect. But the intellect, I think, as long as love, the heart is leading, then the mind can make sense sort of after the heart has opened. But the mind is not going to get us to the heart understanding. Um, so, anyways, I think I'm glad that you highlighted 143 for us. That really speaks to this. Brian, please.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, there's a lot that we've covered in the past couple of minutes, so my mind is spinning a little bit with all of this. But I just am thinking of like how would Steiner react to, us using an AI to sort of abstract his thoughts into a summary. And it's it's something I think I have thought of before, actually. Like I've thought of, because I've seen like these Alan Watts, AI things on YouTube and things like that. So I was always wondering, like, is someone going to do this with Steiner? And I'm sort of uncomfortable a little bit with it, because I do think that, what we learned throughout these leading thoughts is that, anthroposophy is, I guess, fighting for like the cosmic intelligence. And I do see sort of a confrontation and within this sort of artificial intelligence and then the cosmic intelligence that we are cultivating or learning about. And I think actually what Rosemary said, yeah, with the love that is sort of on a launch pad, you can think of it in terms of the calendar of the soul, but you can also think of it as like even farther out than that, that we are at a point where we do need to start moving in that direction. And I do think that there's a part of the old sort of dead artificial intelligence that is kind of trying to not really go in that direction, in a human sort of love-based direction. And I would also say that I understand using it for the summary and everything, but I also and yes, you can experience the lectures of Steiner through the artistic view, like Bruce said, but I also think you can experience it in a logical view as well, that is different from that feeling realm as well. Like, and it doesn't have to be that we are, going straight to the heart. Sometimes you want to go through the head, then to the heart, then back to the head, rather than immediately going for the feeling and then relying on that. Because what Steiner, I think, emphasizes a lot as well is that spiritual path starts with logical thinking first. That's like the first thing you want to do. Studying Plato, studying more like pure logic. And I think a lot of his lectures and things that he talks about are very logical in that way as well. And I think that if you summarize it and abstract it away, you're missing the development that you're getting from actually reading through the whole thing. And Bruce is nodding his head, so he obviously agrees with this as well. But yes, I think you need to have both perspectives, I guess. So yeah, a lot to think about. I actually have to drop off the call now, but I just wanted to quickly address that. So thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I can't remember exactly what Steiner says in Philosophy of Freedom, but there's some point where he notes that this text is written for those who have that facility with the thinking aspect of the human being, and to really enter into the moral imagination through thinking. But if I recall correctly, he says that some will be drawn to anthroposophy or to the Christ impulse really as purely as an impulse of the heart, and might not go through the mind, as you're saying, or through thinking activity. And I'll have to find the exact passage because I don't want to misconstrue what his point was there. But I just recall him saying that the path of intuitive thinking might not be for everyone. I mean, obviously it's not, or we'd have more people reading the Philosophy of Freedom. Um, But yeah, I just wonder if there might be other avenues for people for whom that type of really intense, difficult intellectual activity is not their forte. We wouldn't want to block them from having access to the or being able to partake of the Christ impulse. Um, Jeff, please.
Funny, we're talking about AI, and the theme of this section is that which is calculable and that which is incalculable. I guess it's probably not a mistake, and maybe it was introduced with that in mind. But there's so many directions to go here. But if I focus on the Lucifer Ahriman deal, right? So he talks about the sentient soul, and he talks about the intellectual soul, and he talks about the consciousness soul, and he links that with the three memories. He links that with the three histories, the three. Well, what I'm saying is, I suggest that each history has a different inherent memory to it that we have ourselves, that is inherent to us. A cosmic memory, a mythological feeling memory, and a self-conscious sort of linear memory, all working in concert. And in thinking about the sentient soul stage, what I experienced this time, and I've never thought about it this way, before. So I mean, I could be wrong, and I want to preface this by saying I'm always just trying to discover stuff when I try to share here, like I'm writing or meditating or whatever, because we're covering so much material in a certain sense that it's impossible for me to summarize something, at least personally, and then present it as if I'd already figured it out. And it's no fun. So, so what I experience is you could think of the sentient soul as a period, as a discarnate period or pre-embodied period, a pre-incarnated period for the individual personality. And then if you think about one of the last statements he makes, that humans were forged, kind of, this is my language, forged in the fire of the archai, who are also the spirits of personality. Our form reflects a time when we were being forged, say, as spirits of personality. And that's an incarnating process. And when the sentient soul period's happening, we are not yet incarnate in this body, right? And then the intellectual soul comes, and the sentient soul sort of becomes more embodied, right? And the intellectual soul is a misnomer, I think. Increasingly, I think this. It's it's a mythopoetic, to use Karsten's language. It is the mythopoetic part of us that is artistic and feeling oriented and seeks to um, to depict things that are so far beyond language that we need the it needs to be a sort of bridge from the sort of cosmic memory to our self-conscious intellectual age, say. Um, and then the incarnative process, we become more embodied in a sense because of the mind soul period and because of the mythological. And the mythological becomes something of a bridge between where we are now and where we were forged from. And there's a through line, and Michael carries that through line. This is becoming apparent to me, because previously he talks about Michael being the sort of a holder of the past, sort of bringing the past into presence, such that we maintain the fullness of what this intellect can bring through um, through our individual development, but also through humanity's conscious evolution and the evolution of consciousness itself. So where am I going with this? If 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 human beings are to love, they have to do it in an embodied way, right? We were given this gift of life by beings who sacrificed themselves sacrificed an aspect of themselves, say, or an aspect of the universal processes, distilled us in some way. And so isn't this where Michael and the Christ meet in the human soul, as this embodying process, right? And so if our future has to do with the impulses of our will, and clairvoyance is something like waking up in dreamless sleep, then waking up in this life through our feeling life leads us to sort of wake up in the dreamless sleep that we're walking around in every day, which is our will. Yeah, I'm trying to negotiate this with a little bit more clarity, but I believe that this disembodied artificial intelligence is an invitation to become more embodied in relationship to. And I agree that we can't just plug in a a theme and let Steiner talk to us about it, because he is alive in the text. He's alive in the creation, uh, just as any artist is alive in the works of art they've produced. They still live there. But if we have read, if we've studied, if we've meditated, if we've found what for me I've found what I've found through the intellectual epistemological processes is that the world is made up of a chain of being. And I never would have gotten to that without the epistemological stuff. I never would have entered into the idea that not the idea, but the experience of the presence of beings nested in each other. And finally, what I'll say in this long rambling discovery is that when we love as human beings, we reciprocate that which we were given back up that chain of being. And so that I believe is how we are participant in the evolution of the cosmos while evolving ourselves microcosmically at the same time. Okay, I'm going to get off this train.
Thanks, Jeff. I enjoyed the ride. Going back to the comment you made about intellectual soul being a kind of misnomer in the English translation. I put in the chat, the German phrase that Steiner, I believe, usually uses is Verstandes und Gemütseele. And Gemüt means feeling. And so there's this, when you just translate it as intellectual soul, it can seem kind of airy and abstract, but it's clear the intellectual soul there's this etheric dimension to it. There's this feeling dimension to it that gets lost in translation. So I'm glad you highlighted that. And then what you last said about this chain of beings, the great chain of being, if you will, to use Arthur Lovejoy's way of describing it, is a very different conception of the cosmos and of what cosmic evolution is. I wonder if we might, I think of chain as more of that term to me implies a kind of rigid lockstep, almost like deterministic kind of relationship, maybe rather than the universe being the cosmos, just a chain of causes. It's a community of beings, you know, and deeds and relationships, not just forces, right, that are blindly churning out effects. That's the mind and heart shift we're being invited into, is to recognize that the universe is a personal place. It's not just this impersonal playing out of forces. It's a relationship among beings, loving beings, though with some with an harmonic disturbance of some kind that introduces this coldness and this hatred that nonetheless makes us more aware of the love that we want to preserve and amplify and enhance. Yeah, so good ramble in there, Jeff, as Karsten said. James, please.
Yeah, also want to comment what Jeff said. Also, the love going down too. We got to go down and up. So, but anyway, I watched a podcast with you on Formscape, Keelan Morgan. Excellent, and he put out another one. It's called "The Ever-Present Origin." I think it's the work. It's about Jean Gebser, where you have those. This is something like I know that. People who want a different perspective, just not just on Steiner's. I would recommend watching this thing because it's in his perspective on Gebser, but I was blown away because I could see the parallels. Like he's talking about structures of awareness and consciousness, where you have archaic, magical, mythical, mental, and integral. And he was talking all about this, and you could see these and what he was talking about in each category. And then he brought up a thing that there's a telepathy tapes out there by a psychologist, Diane Powell, talking that it's a documented investigation on between nonverbal autism and parapsychological capabilities, and that just blew my mind away because here you're talking about they're reading these autistic people are telepathy. They're reading other people's minds and they're showing it and they're documenting it. And it's not woo woo. I watched it and I'm like, that's a little bit of evidence that what we are seeing is not what we're told or believe because of like a materialistic science, a consciousness. And there's all the, I'm going to put that video in the comment section in the YouTube. So if anybody wants to watch it, he's excellent. I tell you what, that was a good find by you, Mike, Matt, for talking to him. But you look at it, he's Steiner here is talking about memory also, and also the calculable and incalculable. That's something I look at incalculable and memory. Where is the memory? That's the thing that where do we find this memory? And I listen to these people and they always talk about this Mandela effect. And there's people who were, that's their experience. This is what they're talking about. They believe this. That's their experience. I must say, the whole line in the Bible, they say it went from the lion shall lie down with the lamb. And now that sits in the Bible, which I checked mine out, which mine from college. So that was from 1984, said that the wolf shall lay down with the lion. And people were like crazy about that. And I'm like, well, that says to me that it's malleable. Where is memory? What is this? Maybe we should take that in more and everything. But I think you were talking, unfortunately, I was watching you last night, and it was kind of hard for me to watch that, where you were talking to the one whose person was a Roman Catholic, and I am very Roman Catholic. But I come from the cradle. My whole family, everything is Catholic. So I come from that perspective. And I see right now is what you're talking about is like, okay, you got the structure, you got all that, you got it. That's good for the etheric body and everything. But I think someone like you says, well, I don't have nobody. But I think you do. It's yourself. You are like the person who's like the John structure of Christianity, the Johann, because you basically are saying, all right, that love that we have and devotion, and that's what I grew up in. That's the devotion of Christ on the cross, dying for my sins, everything. But now it's time today for that love to transfer from Christ in the cross into my heart, into that person's heart, and your heart. That I see that that's where Christ's at. He's no longer on the cross. He's in us in humanity, and we have to take up his task now and move it forward, our evolution. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Love that, James. Yeah. Yeah, it feels very Luciferic, this hunger I see manifesting in these conversions for an institutional structure of some kind. Um, Rather than, as you're saying, the task now is to internalize this love and not to seek the protection of a human institution, even though, of course, um, church life can provide a tremendous sense of soul sheltering and strengthen our etheric bodies and give us community. And it's enriching and valuable and important. And maybe it is true what these people are saying, that we need these institutions again. We need to not neglect them. But I think that's not the point when it comes to the descent of Christ to the earth. There's something else that needs to be attended to there, that has nothing to do with institutional religion, or at least is not limited to institutionalized religion. Um, yeah, so appreciate that. And I shared a link to conversation I had with Keelan in the chat for those who are curious to check that out. I love his work as a video essayist. Um, he's reaching a lot of people. It's exciting to see his articulations of Steiner and yeah, Jean Gebster and others. Um, he's a creative guy. I'm not sure who's on the phone, but please go ahead and chime in.
Hi, this is Doug,
Oh,
disconnected again.
hey, Doug.
Trying to multitask. Hey, uh, so I am what most people, traditional people would call an atheist. However, I have found in my own spirituality great lessons from the Christian people I've been able to be influenced by. And that includes the Black church here in the U.S., actually. They definitely feel it, I think, much more than the traditional white church. I'm skeptical about Steiner, but his methodology, his approach is opening up a lot of doors for me. And just looking at the changes of consciousness over history, that's been an ongoing question, and reading Steiner has enriched that much. I would argue that the public nature of Christ has evolved, that America is in fact a new Christian nation, that democracy and the Constitution, those are attempts to make real what Christ attempted, and of course that we are now at risk of losing. In that history, Muhammad, as a prophet, was successful where Jesus was not. And of course, it has had its own failings and successes over history as well. I'm here because of Matt and becoming a Whiteheadian, reasonably far along in that path. Whitehead has a concept of a mental pole and a physical pole. I think that to some extent, to a large extent, corresponds with Steiner's sense of the spiritual and the physical. And you need both. And, they can come in different flavors, and that can happen all sorts of different ways. I'm currently in another reading group, which is reading a Whiteheadian interpretation of Marx. And Marx was writing at the time of the emergence of democracies, and where the worker could vote, and also at the emergence of the industrial area with the root of materialist abuses that Steiner identifies rather prudently. And I guess just to close, I am a critic of Marxism, although I certainly support the critique. The methodology is not very good. The alienation of labor and the early philosophical works, that's strong, but his science his economic science is pseudo. And he's a petty bourgeois, a petty burger, which is the German version of that word, just as he critiques other socialist parties of being. And the funny thing, and this is where I think a Whiteheadian analysis of Marx is fruitful, and not just timely with the election of Donald Trump. you can look at the worker as being alienated from the mental pole or the spiritual pole in their work, in the ownership of their work. But this alienation has also occurred in the creative class. And just thinking about it now, I think the priest class as well, in that stage of consciousness, they have been alienated from the physical pole, the ability to actually do work. And I'm not aware of anybody else that's seen that, but that's just very clear. And a critique of Marxists. They're all about everything so evil, but they can't actually compete. I got to go. My dog's hassling a motorcyclist. I'm still here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. Lots of interesting stuff there. Yeah, I mean, one of the aspects of AI that we didn't touch on is the way in which it's not just now the workers whose labor is being exploited or who are alienated from their labor, but the creative class or the producers of knowledge, the culture workers who are having their work exploited to train these large language models and image generators and so on. All of this language and imagery that these machine learning systems are creating comes from human beings. It's a kind of reproductive rather than productive or creative imagination. It's rearranging things that human beings have made. And I think real creativity is quite different from that. And these are real economic issues, economic justice issues. And yeah, I guess you're reading Anne Pomeroy's book on Marx and Whitehead. I've read that text, and yeah, I think the Marxist critique of how workers are treated is valid, but the alternative proposal is not a good idea. Steiner, I think, sees this quite similarly in terms of shifting us from an economy where you get paid for the products of your, rather where you get paid for your labor time rather than the products of your labor. I think is an important um, insight, because if you're selling your time and so your productive capacity to somebody else, you're basically a slave. And I was just listening to Noam Chomsky years ago respond to somebody's, comment that, oh, well, capitalism has improved the quality of life over time, so therefore it's defensible. And he says, well, the quality of slaves' lives improved over time too. A slave in 1850 was living better than a slave in 1750. That's not an argument in favor of slavery. And Chomsky sort of repeated the arguments that the Confederates leaders would make about how, they treated their slaves like, I mean, this is Chomsky being somewhat tongue in cheek, but these were the arguments. They treated their slaves like people, whereas the capitalists in the North who were employing people treated them just like tools to be, used for their industrial purposes to make more profits. Um, Maybe a spurious argument, but Chomsky's point was that, wage slavery is still slavery. And I think we have major forms of alienation operative in our economy today that Marx can't fix, but he's seeing it. The Marxists are seeing it. They just don't have I think the spiritual worldview that would allow us to actually resolve it. Yeah. Elsa, please.
I might jump in real quick.
Sure. Yeah, and then I'll give Elsa the last word. Go ahead, Doug.
Yes. I am wondering if, as the devil can quote scripture for his own purpose or her own purpose, if the AI quotation unto itself is in fact an example of evil unto itself. Whereas if a human is using AI, it is like reading the scriptures, reading all of human experience. Thank you.
Hmm. So in other words, we should resist allowing AI to gain too much autonomy and really treat it as something that humans are guiding. I don't know if that's your point. We're the decision makers, not letting the AI agents make the decisions and judgments for us.
I hope so.
Yeah. Elsa, please. Um, is anyone hearing Elsa? I'm not hearing you yet. You might have to switch your mic on. No, not hearing you. Do you see the mic icon in the bottom left corner of the Zoom screen, and make sure you have the right microphone selected? Yeah, unfortunately, not hearing you. Sorry about that, Elsa. Maybe you can comment on the Substack post later and share. I'd love to hear what you wanted to share with us. All right. Well, our hour really flew by today. Very engaging dialogue. Um, I will share this video on the Substack and write up a little summary, and then can continue the conversation there in comments. Looking forward to reading the document you shared with us, Bruce, um, about the cosmos of love. And yeah, session 9 next week. See you all then.